Hi, everybody. Today's Wednesday, August 20th, 2025, and our friend Scott Ritter is back with us. Welcome back, Scott.
Thanks for having me.
Let's start with the meeting between the two presidents, the president of the United States and the Russian president. You were in Russia that day, yeah? If you,
And the whole
yeah.
week leading up to it, too.
How did it feel there to be there and watching what's going on?
Well, it was very interesting because, first of all, I would say that the Russian population and the Russian media is orders of magnitude more informed about the realities, about the nuances of policy. You compare and contrast that to American mainstream media and, frankly speaking, the American audience who knows nothing about the topic, believes what they're told, spoon-fed by the mainstream media, which is just a total bag of lies. So it was actually quite exhilarating to be amongst people who took the concept of being an informed citizen. I know Vladimir Putin's an evil dictator. There's no democracy in Russia. And I mean, those Russians are just a bunch of robots. But for robots, they're a hell of a lot more informed than we are about the issues of the day, especially this particular issue. And the other thing I would say is that, maybe President Trump doesn't realize this, but Russia's on his side, not because they're losing. This is what people don't understand. Russia's winning decisively. I mean, the Russians know it, but these people are so humane, so decent that they, even when winning, they don't want to continue killing. They want this war to end, and they're hopeful that Donald Trump can, breathe some common sense into the Ukrainians and their European allies, and make them recognize that, the only way out is to accept Russia's terms, and Russia's going to get those terms one way or another, either by killing another 1.7 million Ukrainians or by having Donald Trump, knock some sense into the heads of those who want to continue this war to the last Ukrainian. But the Russian people were amazing. The Russian officials were articulate and well informed, and it was a treat to be in Russia while this summit took place and to get the reaction of the Russians.
What was agreed on, Scott, in your opinion, during the meeting between the two presidents? It was some sort of a framework to get along, to get somehow to understand each other, the United States together with Europeans somehow getting closer, I would argue, and knowing what is the Russian position. We had the meeting between the two presidents talking to each other. It was amazing because for more than 3 years we haven't seen such a thing happening. That was amazing. But what was substantial? What was important? The outcome of the meeting.
Well, the most important thing is that Donald Trump completely reversed his position. He was going in with a position that just wasn't going to go anywhere about an immediate ceasefire. Russia made it clear. And I think it's important before we continue to understand a couple realities. When Vladimir Putin speaks, it is. When Donald Trump speaks, just wait a couple minutes and he'll say something different. There's no consistency in Donald Trump. And that's because he's poorly served by his advisors, by Marco Rubio, by Steve Bessent, or Scott Bessent, by all these other people who are Russophobic and they whisper crap into his ear. The one-on-one time with Vladimir Putin was the only time that Donald Trump's gotten accurate information about what's going on in Ukraine. And basically Putin read him in on the reality that Russia's winning this war. Russia's going to win this war. Nothing's going to stop Russia from winning this war. And that, Russia's goal is to ensure it never has to do this again. In order to do that, stop talking about a ceasefire and start talking about a comprehensive peace deal. And look, that's the position that Donald Trump embraced. That's the result of this summit, is that Donald Trump, for the first time now, has American policy rooted in reality. It's still a long way to go, but this has far more chance of success than any ceasefire demands put by Donald Trump. That was a dead end. it's got to be sort of humiliating for Donald Trump, to say about how he's going to kick Putin's ass, and I'm going to read him the riot act, and Putin's going to know the truth, and Putin's going to know the consequences, and Putin's going to know this. And then they have a short little meeting in the car, and Trump comes out and goes, yeah, no ceasefire. We're going with the comprehensive plan that the Russians have put together.
It's not just about Donald Trump. We see some sort of division in within the European Union. We see that when Merz was talking about the ceasefire, you see Meloni somehow. What is he talking about?
But who cares? How many Italian divisions are going to Ukraine? None. So why are we talking about Italy? I mean, Meloni's cute. Of all the people that went there, she's the easiest on the eyes, so people like to look at her. And she's entertaining. She has a very expressive face. She likes to roll the eyes. She's as irrelevant as the rain that's falling down from the sky right now. She is, who cares what Giorgia Meloni thinks? No one. Merz, no one cares. He got shut down. Starmer, shut down. Macron, ignored. Stubb, who's Stubb? Rutte calls him daddy, and Ursula von der Leyen, again, why she exists, nobody knows. Not a single one of the people there matters. Not a single one of them matter. Trump doesn't care what they think. Ignored them all. There's no more humiliating photo op than the one that has Donald Trump behind his desk with all these little miscreants sitting in front of him, begging for attention. Zelensky, I don't know how many times he said thank you while he's getting, nothing that he wants. Look at the details. Forget the crap, the way the mainstream media spins it and all these other people out there. Look at the details. There are no details that emerged from this meeting. None. Article 5 like protection. What does that mean? Nothing, because they don't know what it means. There's nothing there. Nothing's going to happen because Russia won't let it happen. I just want to remind everybody, Russia's winning this war. They're not losing this war. It's not like Russia's looking for favors here. They don't care. They'd like this war to end, but they're going to keep on going. I just spoke to several senior Russian, officers. They're winning. They're not worried. From their perspective, yeah, they'd like to stop killing Ukrainians. And by the way, the ratio, and I've talked about it before. I said, 12 to 20 dead Ukrainians for every dead Russian. Turns out that I was spot on accurate. Imagine that, military expert being, accurate about something like this. It's just the way the battlefield reality is, and it's going to get worse. The conditions for the Ukrainians are getting worse and worse, and for the Russians, it's getting better and better. And soon, it's just going to be an absolute massacre. Russia could do this all year. They don't care. These guys have been fighting war for 3.5 years, and Russians aren't like Americans. Have to rotate home every 6 months. When the Russians deploy, it's to victory. How long are you going to be there? Until victory. Until victory. Until victory. So I don't know what anybody thinks they're doing. I mean, all this nonsense about, a territorial swap. There's going to be no territorial swap. Vladimir Putin, just so people understand, has no authority whatsoever to give up an inch of Russian territory. Can't do it. So all these people saying, well, he agreed to this and that. No, he didn't. Absolutely not. First of all, he's indicated that he cannot agree. It's a constitution. That's Mother Russia. He will get all that land back. It's just a question of when. He's willing to agree to a cessation of hostilities if they get all of the Donbass back. But then in the hard peace negotiations to follow, he gets all of Russia and a buffer zone and demilitarization and denazification. I mean, people don't understand that the Russians aren't yielding one thing at all. Ukraine started this war, pushed on by the West. Russia's going to finish it. That's what came out. That's what Putin heard. That's what Trump heard. He knows reality. He knows reality. But he has to play a political game now because he can't just immediately go down that path. He has to do things, play games, posture. And it's frustrating for people to look at it because we're not always read into what the hell's going on in Donald Trump's mind. But if you take a look at where his rhetoric before Alaska brought him, you'll see it was a complete 180-degree flop, complete 180-degree flop. Because for the first time, he had reality thrust upon him.
Here is what he said, Scott, Donald Trump, after the meeting with Europeans.
Got the Article 5 protections, though, for Ukraine. So they're not going to be a part of NATO, but you still got them the same protections.
So they're not going to be a part of NATO, but we've got the European nations, and they'll front-load it, and they'll have some of them, France and Germany, a couple of them, UK. They want to have, boots on the ground. Not in. I don't think it's going to be a problem, to be honest with you. I think Putin is tired of it. I think they're all tired of it. But you never know. We're going to find out about President Putin in the next couple of weeks. That I can tell you, and we're going to see where it all goes.
Did you hear what he said? He doesn't know anything. He didn't say that France is going to put. They wanna put boots on the ground. They've been wanting to put boots on the ground forever. Russia won't let them. We're going to find out where Putin is next. Trump, you know where Putin is. He told you straight up where he is. There's no yielding. So Trump is just blowing smoke at everybody. He knows what the reality is. The thing that he knows is that over the course of the next several weeks, Russia is going to kick the living crap out of Ukraine and change battlefield reality and therefore change political reality. And nothing that was agreed upon. I mean, this whole, humiliation of Europe where you have to buy weapons from the United States, and apparently it's a 10% markup. I mean, Donald Trump is one corrupt individual. He's selling weapons to Ukraine to the Europeans with a 10% markup. That's his Secretary of Treasury saying it, so that they can send it to the Ukrainians. But these weapons haven't been built yet. It's not like you're going to Walmart or Home Depot and picking it up off the shelf. This is where you have to open up the catalog and say, we need you to build this for me. And they go, well, we've got a backlog, and you might get to this in 2028. If you think Ukraine's going to be here in 2028, you've been snorting some heavy coke, and Zelensky's going to be mad because you're taking his stash. This is utter humiliation. Nobody ever bothers to dig past. I just told you. There is no commitment to Article 5. None. Trump sort of starts off like there is, and then they wanna. That doesn't mean there is, right? They wanna do a lot of things. It ain't going to happen. U.S. talking about air power. You think Russia's going to let American airplanes fly over Ukraine? No. Is it going to happen? Not until the war is over and denazification took place or whatever. But some talk now being floated about a no-fly zone. There is a no-fly zone. Russia owns it. It's called Ukrainian airspace. Fly and die. It's just stupid what's going on right now. Meanwhile, the Ukrainians are getting wiped out on the battlefield. But we don't care in the West. We don't care. We sent them to die a long time ago.
It seems that Europeans are mostly interested in having security guarantees for Ukraine. But do you see a common ground in that sense, in having a security that would be somehow acceptable for Russians, for European, for the United States, and mostly for Zelensky and his administration? Because it doesn't seem that they would remove Zelensky from power. They want to keep Zelensky in power.
Who?
Europeans, it seems to me.
They don't matter. They don't count. Who cares? Russia is the one who sets the terms. And they've already said that Zelensky's a president that lacks in any legal mandate. Didn't have the election when he should have. Constitutionally, he doesn't exist. And they can't sign a deal with him. And whatever talk that people have about what it's going to look like down the road, understand that there will not be, a peacekeeping force in Ukraine until there's a peace to keep. Denazification, demilitarization, all that happens. And then you have people come in. So it's embarrassing to listen to Europe talk. They live in a fantasy world that's totally detached from reality, and they're all over the map. They don't know what to agree upon. They don't have a singular position. I mean, you heard each of these leaders briefing something different to the president. And the president doesn't have a plan either. How could he? He just flopped 180 degrees. Now he's moving in. Russia's going to have needs a comprehensive peace. And at the end of the day, this president's also said, we'll walk, which may be what happens. I mean, he really needs to pound the table, step up, tell Europe to sit down and shut up, and turn to Zelensky and say, either you agree to what I do here, but when you leave here, you're a dead man. I will hunt you down and kill you myself. You're the problem, not the solution. You are a horribly corrupt individual. We have the books on you. You're slaughtering your own people. So your only chance of survival right now is to basically give in on everything we've just said, and then get the hell out of the way. Go to Miami. You can go wherever you want to go, but no. See, Trump's not doing that, and as a result, he breathes false hope into the Europeans and Zelensky. Russia's not yielding. I wish people would study Russia more before they open their mouths. So you understand that when you keep saying Putin does this, Putin doesn't do anything unless it's constitutionally allowed. He's the president of Russia. He's bound by Russian law. And he can't give up territory. The Duma would have to basically pass a resolution that redefined what the Kherson Zaporizhia are. But void of that, Trump has no power, no authority to say, oh, yeah, we're going to give up this land. Can't do it constitutionally. And Russia is constitutionally founded. Hell, they obey their constitution a lot better than we do.
Do we know anything about the proposal that the Russian part was talking about before going to the meeting? They said that they received a proposal from the United States. That's why they're trying. The Russian president is going to meet Donald Trump. What was that? What is it? Do we know anything about that?
We don't know. I think what happened is that Trump is trying to push an economic proposal, and it looks like Vladimir Putin, paved the way by, I guess he signed a decree right before we went over that opened up Sakhalin for development. It's a big energy development there in the Pacific. The Japanese are invested. America has a big investment, and he basically opened it up for continued investment. And I think that was a signal that Russia is willing to let the West back in, and the West can make a lot of money. There was talk about the Arctic and things of that nature, but I think what happened is, this meeting that was supposed to go for 6 hours went for 3 hours. The luncheon they were supposed to have didn't happen because basically all the preparation that Trump's team had done was thrown away in minute one because Vladimir Putin changed the narrative, took control of the narrative. Now the U.S. is playing catch up, and we're still catching up. The Russians are in the catbird seat here. They're driving. This is, again, the president of the United States has been poorly served by his advisors. He should never have gone into this meeting this unprepared. Vladimir Putin is always over-prepared. They have options, fallback plans, the whole thing. You're not going to outflank them. You're not going to surprise them.
Do you feel that the war would continue, Scott? Because after the meeting, both sides, the United States and the Russians, were somehow positive about the outcome of the meeting. But in the aftermath of the meeting between Europeans together with Zelensky, with Donald Trump, do you think that those little hopes that we had after the meeting are fading away?
I don't think the Russians had hope. They're very realistic. They know exactly what's going on. The Russians will continue to fight. I can guarantee you that. you know, the United States, I mean, Donald Trump would like to see peace, but it requires Zelensky to embrace reality, and it requires Europe to likewise embrace reality. Neither of them appear ready to do this. And without that, there will be no peace. That's as clear as the day. So, again, this is up to Donald Trump now. He had this meeting with the Europeans. I think now he will turn to them and say, "You don't have a plan. You keep saying you have a plan, but that plan requires us to do something. We're not going to do that. And if you don't have anything else to add, you have to step aside. We're going to finish the job." But he hasn't done that.
Does it feel that Europe is so much concerned about Ukraine, or somehow their concerns are related to the future of Europe? They cannot sustain, they cannot live without the United States. Living without the United States is somehow difficult for them.
No, impossible. Not difficult, impossible. They're the unweaned children. They can't leave the nest, even though they're old enough to have flown the coop a long time ago. I mean, Europe is just fundamentally dysfunctional. Their economies are in tatters. Their political unity is gone out the window. I just reiterate, they've got nothing to add, nothing to contribute, nothing at all. The world would be better off without Europe right now. I mean, I'm not saying to eliminate, I'm just saying if it just learned to shut up, sit down, and not do anything, a lot of problems could be solved. But this European political and economic elite, the system that's in place right now, this horribly inept, corrupt system, is what feeds them. I mean, the coming purge, the economic-driven purge, where these failed leaders will be thrown out into the streets, is the best thing that can happen to Europe. The best thing, single best thing that can happen to Europe. There's hardly a European leader worth saving. There's no major European leader worth saving. They all conspire against the United States. For what reason? Money and power.
I don't know what else do they want from the United States, because looking at the way that the United States went against India and China, and they reached their limits, and they cannot do anything more than that. I don't know if you saw Scott Bessent talking about China and India and the way that their economy has been transformed somehow. They're more dependent on Russian oil than before. And here is what he said.
The history, though, Becky, and China importing it is suboptimal. But if you go back and look pre-22, pre-invasion, 13% of China's oil was already coming from Russia. Now it's 16. So China has a diversified input of their oil. If you go back and look now, I believe India had less than 1% of their oil, 1%, and now I believe it's up to 42. So wow. India is just profiteering.
From 1% to 42. And who's receiving this oil? It's the European Union. Is buying that from India?
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is rich coming from the Secretary of Treasury of a nation whose president stood in the White House and told the world he was going to blow up the Nord Stream 2 pipeline in front of the chancellor who owned it. That chancellor said nothing. So, and then after we blew up that pipeline, what do? We turn around and sell. We blow it up in the name of preventing Russia from selling energy to Europe, remove the leverage of influence. Then we turn around and sell them a tanker full of liquid natural gas, steep markup, some 4 times the price. And invest in what considers that good business. It's bad for the one side to, curry favor by paying people off, but what do? We just ripped the Germans off like you wouldn't believe, and they're dumb enough to let it continue to happen. It's embarrassing, but yeah, I'd say Donald Trump, when he's fully engaged in, an issue, he's trying to make money. That's it. It's not for the national security of the United States. It's money, and the Russians have broken the code. That's why their lead, their response was, "Hey, let's jointly develop the Arctic. Let's open up Sakhalin. There's way to make money." That's why Kirill Dmitriev is one of their point men. He's a money guy. That's why one of the most effective conduit for informational exchange isn't Marco Rubio to Sergei Lavrov. One would think it would be, but no. It's Steve Witkoff, Donald Trump's personal friend and special envoy, and Kirill Dmitriev, a guy who runs a private investment fund.
Can Ukraine achieve what it has in its mind in terms of the security guarantees without Russia being part of it?
No. Russia's not going to allow Ukraine to exist as a cancerous tumor. So nothing Ukraine wants they're going to get. Nothing. I mean, they made their choice. They're literal Nazis. Why should they have a right to continue to govern?
Because what it feels when you see the meeting that Donald Trump had with Europeans together with Zelensky, it seems that they're somehow trying to remove Russia from the scene in terms of providing security guarantees, which I argue that Russia is the most important player in that term. If they want something substantial for Ukraine, Russia has to be part of the discussion. Russia has to be part of that agreement. But it doesn't seem that comes, even Donald Trump, when he's talking about putting troops on the ground, because after the meeting with Vladimir Putin, it's somehow so much unbelievable. You cannot believe that the president of the United States talking this way.
Again, I think we just have to stop talking about Europe. They don't matter.
But they're there, Scott. After all,
they aren't there. They're not there. What's there? The French army doesn't exist. The British army doesn't exist. The German army doesn't exist. What is Europe? A dysfunctional economy that's collapsing as we speak. No defense industry worthy of the name. Europe isn't there. To be there, you've got to be there physically. You got to be able to do something. They can't even poop out 30,000 troops for a peacekeeping force. That's the number they came up with, and then suddenly they go, oh, we don't have enough. Can't do it. There is no Europe. It exists in the mind of Donald Trump alone. Russia doesn't care about Europe. Russia doesn't consider them at all. They are nothing. Russia doesn't wake up in the morning and go, oh, we have to really worry about the Europeans. They're irrelevant. They made themselves irrelevant. Economically? No. I mean, they're still pathetic. They still buy their energy from Russia. They still buy their energy from Russia. They just lie about it. They lie about it. They get it from the Indians. They get it from the Turks. No one talks about Turk Stream. Sit there and blew up Nord Stream, but nobody talks about Turk Stream and how all that Russian gas is going through Turkey straight up into Southern Europe. No one talks about that. Europe is so full of it's not even funny. There is no Europe. We waste too much time talking about these people. They're the giant nothing burger. It will have nothing to do with any peace in Ukraine. Nothing. Trump gives them the time of day. Russia doesn't. Do you see Russia worrying about Europe? No. They'll talk to Donald Trump. They won't talk to Europe. Why? What's in it for Russia? What does France have to offer? Russian food's better. I know. I just ate a whole bunch of it. Russia's a cleaner place. Paris is just a filthy cesspool of a city nowadays. Moscow, clean. You can go to any third-tier Russian city. It's cleaner and more modern than anything Paris has to offer. Why do people think the Russians need Europe or want Europe or care about Europe? They used to, but Europe divorced Russia. It's not the other way around. Russia didn't walk away from Europe. Europe walked away from Russia. And Russia's moved on. So we spend far too much time talking about Europe. If the second somebody says British troops are, where are they coming from? Name the unit. Name the unit. Can't, can you? You don't even know what unit's going to deploy over there. How many tanks do they have? Not that many. Can they logistically sustain them? Do they have the heavy transport capability to move these tanks from their barracks in England to where are they going to go? You're going to go overland into Romania? You're going to come in by ship? And then in Romania, you're going to set up a big logistics base there with what troops? With the great British Logistic Expeditionary Force? And then what? Now you're going to project them into Ukraine. Well, for what line of communication? And when they get there, what's the rotation thing? Is this a 6-month tour? So you got to be careful there, you're Britain, because you don't have enough troops. Because let's say you put 5,000 in, that means you need at least 15,000 committed to the mission. That's most of your army, because you're pathetic and you're small and you're stupid and you're useless and you're meaningless and you haven't trained and your guys are fat. And then we get to the French. What French troops are going to go? They had to cannibalize everything just to get this expeditionary battalion sent to Romania now. Now they want to turn into a brigade? With what troops? With what equipment? How do you sustain it? They did a major logistics exercise a couple years ago. It capped out, I think, at 12,500 is the maximum troop flow that France is capable of putting through right now. But this is a big deal. How do you get troops from A to B? And then how do you sustain them? Because, when troops show up, they need food, a lot of it. They eat. They need electricity. Where are your generators? Where's the fuel? Where's the trucks to transport the fuel? Where's the spare tires? What happens when these trucks start breaking down? Do you have a mobile maintenance team? Where's it? Can it deploy? French can't do any of this. None of it. Nobody can but us, America. We're the only ones capable of doing any of these things out of NATO. Mark Rutte, Secretary General of NATO, right? He used to be the Secretary of or the Minister of Defense for Netherlands. And under him, the Dutch military went straight to hell. They had major exercises where their troops actually had to run around and go bang, 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 because they didn't have any functioning weapons or ammunition. And now he's the Secretary General talking about rebuilding great military might to take on Russia. What a moron. Before we talk about Europe, you've got to tell me what Europe's got, what Europe brings to the table. And you can't. They got nothing. They bring nothing to the table. The only people wasting time about Europe is America and in the media. You don't see Russia worrying at all about this, at all. They're just not.
The reason that I think Europe is important, I'm not comparing Russia to Europe militarily. I'm just talking about the security of the region. Just imagine the United States comparing its military to Mexico or to Canada. It's not even comparable. But after all, for the security of the region, you need to have an agreement, some sort of mutual understanding between the parties involved in that region.
No, you don't. Ukraine is Russia. There's the agreement.
Ukraine is Russia, can be part of Russia, can be some sort of...
is part of Russia, will be part of Russia, not can be.
But the western part of Ukraine never going to be part of Russia.
Oh, it was part of Russia. It's part of the Soviet Union.
But
You know,
they're
they
not
beat the
interested
Banderas
by
once. You do know that, right, Nima? They beat the Banderas once. They arrested them all. They killed a whole bunch of them, kicked everybody else. Russia will do it again if they have to. Now, you know, Natrishkin, the intelligence guy, had a conference earlier this summer. We talked about giving it to Poland. I mean, that would be the ultimate, you know, gotcha move to all those little Banderas son of a bitches out there, because the Poles know, Volyn massacre, the Poles couldn't wait to get a hold of these Bandera scum and beat them into submission. You know, that could happen. How about the Ruthenians? You know, those Hungarians that are living down there and they're getting beat up by the Ukrainians right now. Hungary wants them back. There's a whole bunch of Romanians that want to go to Romania as well. There could be the partition of Europe. The Russians already discussed this. Okay, but that's not a security guarantee. That's just chopping up dead meat. That's just taking the dead Ukrainian body and go, bap, get rid of it. Bap, get rid of the spoiled parts. Bap. And Russia takes the rest. Ukraine doesn't exist. It's a dysfunctional nation, the most corrupt place on the planet. They've sold their women into the sex trade. Go to Europe. Go to any major city. Take a look at who the prostitutes are. Ukrainian women. You know, that's what Ukraine's done. Their men are dead, and the women have sold themselves into prostitution. Go to Kiev. Go to Klitschko, you know, the great mayor, nice guy, boxer. He owns half the whorehouses in Kiev. And he staffs them with women who have lost their everything, whose husbands have died on the front, who don't have anything because they've been denied the pension. So he comes in, he says, "You're my prostitutes now." And he sends half of them over to Europe to make money. This is Ukraine. This is the reality. The West ignores it. The people that know it are the mercenaries that go over there. They know, because all they do is get drunk and get laid. And then they die on the battlefield. This is the reality. This is the reality of Ukraine. It's a piece of crap country whose people have long ago lost any notion of unity and pride and everything. They've sold themselves out. Their only salvation is through Russia. Their only salvation. Because the Russians are the only ones who care about them. Nobody else cares about them. If you cared about Ukraine, you wouldn't allow this to happen. 1.7 million dead Ukrainian soldiers. Does that not resonate? You know, so let's just stop talking about Europe and security guarantees. Europe doesn't provide any. Europe can't even secure itself. Let's talk about the reality of Europe and security guarantees. There is no air defense system in Europe. None. Russia could destroy all of Europe in a simple 1 week long air campaign. Russia's building 1,000 Shahed style drones a day. They stock up, you know, because they're expending, 500-600 a day max output, but they may get up to 1,000. But the point is, the Russians have the ability in a very short period of time to flood Europe with 50,000 drones. 10,000 over 5 days. And there won't be anything left standing in Europe because they have nothing to defend themselves with. They have no air defense. None. Zero. And then we're not even talking about Oreshnik. We're not even talking about, Kinzhal. We're not even talking about Zircon. We're talking about drones. Europe can't defend itself. This is the reality. I don't know why people don't get it. The Poles run out of ammunition in 14 days. The British run out of ammunition in 7 days, but it doesn't matter because they'll run out of troops in 2. The French won't even get out of the barracks. The Germans, 16% said they'd fight for Germany if it was invaded. 16%. Now we're talking about German troops, moving, invading someone else. No one will do that. You have insane people up there talking, Starmer's talking about, this, that, and the other thing. The British people won't follow him. They won't fight this war. The French people won't follow Macron. All this stuff is just hot air. Nobody's going to do it because they can't do it and they don't want to do it. These leaders are so totally disengaged from reality. Their people don't care about this. They're not willing to die for Ukraine. The American people are that way too now. This is why Trump, basically Marco Rubio after the Alaska summit said, yeah, we're done. We're not sending any more weapons to Ukraine. That's it. Free ride's over. If Ukraine wants a weapon, they got to have the Europeans buy it. And like I said, the Europeans aren't buying it off the shelf. They're buying it out of the catalog, which means it ain't going to be ready for years. So, what does Europe want? You want a European security framework? Russia handed them a treaty, December 17th, 2021. When Europe dusts that off and opens it up and says, we're willing to talk about this, then Russia will listen to them. But until then, it's just, it's fantasy. It's like a high school football player talking about which NFL team he wants to lead to the Super Bowl. You got to graduate high school first, son. Then you got to play college. Then you got to hope you get drafted onto a winning team. But until then, it's just a fantasy. It's never going to be fulfilled. Russia is the NFL. Europe, a freshman high school football team. That's it. That's all they are.
Where is Poland and its policy? You don't see the president of Poland coming to the United States. Poland was, you remember when this war started, one of the most hawkish countries toward Russia during those days was Poland, and somehow they have been transformed into a new position. What is the new position of the Polish government in Ukraine?
Well, I think Poland's become reality-based. First of all, I think some of the nationalists are saying if we just shut up, we're going to get Western Ukraine. Just shut up. Don't say no word. Shh. And they're hoping for that outcome. They have to be careful because they have to remember that if they get Western Ukraine, that was part of the land swap. Russia takes over that part because that's the Curzon line, but they compensated by giving Poland Silesia and Pomerania, East Prussia. Start redrawing the line the other way. What do you think the Germans are going to do? Sit back and go, that's okay, cool. No, Germans will say, we get our lands back too. Start redrawing the lines on a map. Very dangerous thing. Very dangerous thing. Which is why Russia didn't want to do it. Again, I just have to remind people, the Russians bent over, they bent backwards to keep the 1991 frontiers in place, even though they didn't like it. Russia always believed that Donbass belonged to it. They always believed that Crimea belonged to it. But they said, we will recognize the 1991 frontiers because that was what was agreed to. It wasn't Russia that broke any deals. They didn't break the 1994, Budapest memorandum. Ukraine did. Because I think everybody tends to gloss over the thing about neutrality. Oh, dear. Ukraine wanted to join NATO. You're not neutral anymore. I guess the Budapest memorandum doesn't apply anymore. No, they forget about all this aspect of it. The Russians, even when 2014 started, they didn't go to absorb Donbass. They just said we're here to protect the rights of the people there. But the Minsk Accords was all about having Ukraine maintain control over those territories as part of Ukraine. And Crimea was only taken after the thugs, the Azov people, tried to bum rush Crimea and take it, and due to Sevastopol, what they did in Odessa, burn people alive and that sort of thing. And the Russians said, hell no. Well, they got the big naval base here, and they just said that's just not going to fly. Little green men showed up, and Crimea is now part of Russia. But that wasn't Russia's plan. That wasn't their intent. They didn't start this. Russia didn't start the Maidan. We did. The United States, Europe. They didn't start Donbass. And even when, after the Donbass fighting got going, the Debaltseve is a village in, I think, Lugansk or northern Donetsk. And the Ukrainian army was surrounded. They were going to all be killed. And Putin was ready to give the order, kill them all. because you know what these, you know, they declared an anti-terrorist operation. I don't know how many Americans are aware of that. That when, after the Azov people came in and threatened to get rid of language, religion, culture, to erase the Russian identity, and the Russians rose up and said, you can't erase us. Poroshenko called them terrorists and initiated an anti-terrorist operation, which then had Ukrainian artillery firing into villages and towns and cities, slaughtering civilians. Slaughtering. Even after that, when Russia came in to help, they said, under the Minsk Accords, these territories belong to Ukraine. We just need you to recognize the rights of the Russian people. They get to practice the Orthodox faith, they get to speak their language, and they get to preserve their history. You don't get to go around and knock down monuments and all this kind of stuff. That's all Russia wanted. And even in the end, you know, when the Russians, you know, started the special military operation, it was only because Ukraine mobilized 60 to 80,000 troops, began a 10-day pre-invasion bombardment, intensifying the bombardment of the Donbass. And the Russians said, we have to preempt this. So they did. But their strategy wasn't to take territory. They were willing to give it all back. They just wanted peace. It was the West that changed everything. You know, so this notion that Russia is the big bad guy that's been out to get the Ukrainians, no, this war was thrust upon them. But now they've made a decision. Ukraine clearly doesn't want to respect the rights of the Russian people. As Vladimir Putin said in a speech to the Duma in 2005, you know, the greatest tragedy of the last century was the collapse of the Soviet Union. Everybody, see, he wants to have this. No, listen to the rest of it. Because overnight, tens of millions of Russians were homeless. He said, I am the president of the Russian Federation and the Russian nation. And the Russian nation knows no borders. The Russian nation is where Russian people live. And Russian people are defined by their language, their history, their culture, their religion. And it's my job as the Russian president to protect them, to defend them. And that's what he did. And when it became clear that the West, neither the West nor Ukraine were willing to behave responsibly, the Russian president said, then I will protect these people by absorbing them into Mother Russia. They had a referendum. And then Putin went to the Duma. The Duma voted. I mean, it all was very procedural, went according to the Constitution. But now these lands belong to Russia forever. Russia will never give them up. And that's where we're at. It's a Russian reality that the West just continues to ignore.
I hope that Donald Trump had some sort of moment with the European leaders to be merely honest with them, that we've sent everything to Ukraine. We cannot do anything economically and militarily to defeat Russia. These are, and instead of bragging about how powerful he is, how strong he is, how can he change everything, he needs to be a little bit humble about what's going on with Russia and just talking in an honest way with Europeans. I think that would help them a lot to understand the situation.
But how do you talk honestly with Macron? Because to do it, you have to tell him to sit down and shut up and listen. Do you really want to humiliate the French president that way? Merck should have been cut off midstream. If he said ceasefire one more time, the president should have slapped his hand on the table and said, shut up. Well, part of we're not going to have a ceasefire, don't you understand? If you continue to articulate for a ceasefire, then you're not welcome to this table because you don't matter. You don't count. You're part of the problem, not the solution. Get the hell out of the White House. That's what the president should have done. Maloney rolled her eyes one more time. That's one too many eye rolls. You're out of here. You're fired. Anybody else? You opened your mouth, you're fired. You see, your job is to listen to me. I'm the president of the United States right now. I'm the only voice that counts. And I'm here. Zelensky, like I said, leave. You're not going home. We're throwing you out an airplane over the Atlantic. You're not the president of Ukraine anymore. This is what the president needs to do: take charge, take control. But instead, he has a midterm election coming up, and he has to has to be careful not to alienate, a base that right now will still remain loyal to him. But if the foreign policy is too screwed up, they may move if the Democrats could get their act together, they may transition back to the Democrats. So he has to play a domestic political game, and that's what a lot of this is. It's just domestic political gamesmanship. But every time he's had the opportunity to put the hammer down on Russia with increased sanctions, he's always backed off. And I understand this. If he's not going to sanction Russia, he sure hell isn't going to allow Europe to put troops on the ground in Russia. Because that's war. Literal war.
You've been to Russia last week. Donald Trump was talking about that. When he was talking about putting troops on the ground in Ukraine, he said that Putin is tired of this war, but he's tired, but he's not going to commit suicide in terms to reach an agreement with you. Do you feel, how did you feel in Russia about the people, the way that they're thinking about the battlefield, the Ukraine in the aftermath, in achieving some sort of settlement in Ukraine? Because it's somehow in the mind of Donald Trump, they're so tired of the war in Ukraine. That's why they can agree on anything that Donald Trump is willing to put on the table.
As I said, the Russians are humane people. They have souls. And they'd prefer not to be going around killing people. But Russia's looking for victory. That's it. There's no talk of compromise in Russia. None whatsoever. Zero tolerance for it. They want the war over, but they want victory. No peace without victory. That's the slogan. No peace without victory. That's the reality. Vladimir Putin, he's winning. And he's winning by a landslide. Everything's going his way right now. And no peace without victory. You don't meet with the widows of the fallen soldiers and promise them victory, only to turn around and sell that down there. There's a reason why Vladimir Putin has 85% approval rating in a wartime under sanctions, because he's seen as an effective leader. And one of the things that makes him an effective leader is that he's consistent. They trust him because when he opens his mouth and speaks, that's what happens. There's no mystery about what the Russian position is. The Russians have articulated it several times, Vladimir Putin himself. No mystery whatsoever. It's only the West that makes mystery and intrigue. But from the Russian perspective, their leader has been straight up. The Russians are in this to victory. In this to victory. Well, part of that doesn't the West understand. To victory means victory. It doesn't mean surrender, compromise, frozen conflict, or any of this. Victory means victory, as defined by the Russian president. Demilitarization, denazification, no NATO membership.
Yeah. When we talk about the unity within the BRICS countries, everybody was agreeing that Joe Biden has done something that nobody could have ever done for BRICS in terms of bringing all of them together.
You mean Trump?
Yeah, Biden before Trump coming to power, but it seems that Trump is better than Biden.
Yeah, because BRICS under Biden,
bringing China and India the way together that no one was able to do it before.
I mean, because both Brazil and India were weak links in BRICS. Yeah. Weak links. India weaker than Brazil. I mean, this is why the Brazilian summit was not the smashing success that it could have been, coming off of Kazan. The Russians gave them every chance to have this, but Lula is nervous. He's got a whole cabinet full of people that are pro-Trump and pro-America. India, they have it next year. And there's a lot of concern about what would happen to it. Well, my God, there ain't no concern anymore. Thank you, Donald Trump. You got all 5 BRICS leaders, original core members saying, we're on the same page. We're in this together. You got Iran, a BRICS member now benefiting from this. Donald Trump has, taken the Elmer's glue that was holding BRICS together, and it's now been replaced with the best super glue there is. I mean, BRICS is. I still think China and India is a big issue, but thanks to Donald Trump, their leadership are saying we have to get along. We have to fix these things. And India is just so mad at the United States right now for betraying them. They tried to be a good friend, and they just got betrayed. And I think Brazil, it's over. They're China. I mean, they're China light. So America lost Brazil. We lost all of South America. I mean, it's just ridiculous what's going on right now. We're so bad that Venezuela and Colombia are talking about a mutual defense pact. I mean, it was from Colombia that James Story, the U.S. ambassador, set up the Venezuelan operation. He was kicked out of Caracas. He went to Colombia and was, out of Bogota, was running an anti-Venezuelan operation that led to at least one, televised coup attempt with Juan Guaido and all that. And today, Colombia and Venezuela are on the same page. They're team one. So it's, thank you, Donald Trump. Only one president could have done a better job of making BRICS viable than Joe Biden. And that's Donald Trump, who ran on a platform of saying that he's going to destroy BRICS.
And look at what's going on in South Caucasus. You see, Iran is talking about they're going to establish a new corridor that connects Iran to the Black Sea in Armenia. They're talking about it. And the new agreement, they're improving the relationship with Belarus, security, defense, everything. They're doing
with
it.
Belarus?
Belarus, yeah. The Pezeshkian, the president of Iran, is in
Belarus. Iran. I thought you said Azerbaijan.
No, I'm talking about Iran.
Yeah, Iran. Yeah.
It's all changing, Scott.
But look what happened with Azerbaijan. You're following this, right?
Yeah.
They tried to play stupid games in Ukraine, and Russia just took out all their oil, blew it all up.
Yeah, exactly.
Now their oil is contaminated with chlorides. Can't be produced can't be processed in any refinery. They're losing hundreds of millions of dollars a day. And because Aliyev is such an idiot, the Russians just mobilized the Ural, their strategic reserve force in the Urals have now moved down to replace the Fifth Aid Army. And if Azerbaijan's not careful, you're going to have a Russian-Iranian invasion that gets rid of it in a day. Maybe a week. But the Azerbaijani army can't survive modern warfare.
And believe me, Turkey would do nothing if that happens.
Turkey can do nothing. Again, Turkey's all bluster. Understand this. The Turks, to project military power into Syria, required massive preparations, big bases, logistic bases, and all that. The Turkish Air Force wouldn't last a moment over Azeri skies if it was contested by Russia. And this war will be over so quickly. If you remember how the Azeris incorporated Turkish drones and overwhelmed the Armenians, the Armenian troops just had no chance whatsoever. This is Azerbaijan's future. They'll find that all of their armor is destroyed, all of their logistics is cut off, their command and control doesn't exist, and if they move, they die, and they'll surrender. The entire Azeri army will surrender inside of a week, and Baku will be jointly occupied by the Russians and the Iranians. That's what's going to happen. Russia's not going to play around. Russia's not going to allow a southern front to develop. Russia's not going to let Turkey project itself. You saw the meeting with the Turkish president and the Georgian president, the utter humiliation that was dished out to the Georgian president. The Turks, you have to allow the Meskhetian Turks back into their homeland in Ajaria so that they can so Turkey can then, I guess there's some obscure treaty clause that says that Turkey has the right of intervention in Ajaria to protect, the Islamic population or so. So Turkey wants the Islamic population brought back, 115,000 who were deported by Stalin in 1944. It's just humiliating to the Georgians. So Georgia may end up turning to Russia for protection. You'll have Russian bases in Georgia. And if Azerbaijan's not careful, it won't exist anymore. And that leaves Armenia, who's their prime minister is playing stupid games right now. the best protection the Armenians ever had was the Russians. But Russia wasn't there for them in the last war. Well, let me give you a pro hint. If Vladimir Putin's flying into your capital city and you don't meet him at the airport and you leave him standing on the airplane, sort of put Vladimir Putin in his place, that comes back to bite you. And that's what happened in Armenia. You don't leave the Russian president standing on the platform waiting for somebody to show up to greet him. And Armenia did that. Now they're paying the price. But the Russians aren't going to let the Southern Caucasus become a second front. They will nip this thing in the bud. And for the Iranians, they'd love nothing more than to go in there, because there's that giant Mossad Israeli base inside Azerbaijan that, helps attack there. The Iranians just love to resolve that issue once and for all. So it's a dangerous game that Ali is playing, but he's going bankrupt right now because they can't sell their oil because it sucks. It's bad oil. It's got chlorides in it, and no refinery wants to take this oil.
Who has convinced Donald Trump that he can somehow go to Zangezur corridor to Armenia, Azerbaijan? It seems to me a British project. I don't know how did Donald Trump end up there.
Well, I can't remember his first name, but Barack, I think, is the
Tom Barack.
Yeah, Tom Barack is the ambassador to Turkey. To Turkey, and he appears to be behind all this because now he's the special envoy to Lebanon. Now he's the special envoy to, I guess he's the Zangezur ambassador, because he's the one that came in there and sold this bill of goods to the Armenians and the Azeris. 46 kilometers of asphalt. How do you defend that? You can't. It's just stupid.
Thank you so much, Scott, for being with us today.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I always feel like I let you down because you want some highfalutin intellectual conversation like you have with these other guys.
It was amazing. Yeah, it was amazing because and we are so happy that you got your passport back and you could go to Russia, and everybody's happy.
Well, the trip was unbelievable.
Our audience love you. Yeah,
it was the most. I mean, I've been doing so-called people's diplomacy for a long time, and then I went and spoke to the Iraqi parliament. I've addressed parliaments around the world. I've engaged in intensive preparations for a variety of issues. This week I just spent in Russia was the most intensive week I've ever done doing people diplomacy. My hosts they came in, they said, "Well, we're glad you're here. You ready to work?" And I said, "Work me to the bone." Well, they did. And 5 days of nonstop, but it's what we've done is invaluable. We just published the first of the interviews. I did over 30 interviews. I published the first one today with Yana Lantranova, something like that. I fumbled her name. I apologize to her face because in the interview I fumbled it because, as you say, I can't even pronounce Zangezur. And you want me to pronounce other names, but she's. If you saw Ursula von der Leyen tell Trump about get the Ukrainian children returned, the Russians stole the children, and all this kind of stuff. Well, Yana's the Russian girl that rescued the children from the villages that were shelled by the Ukrainians, killing the parents, leaving the children abandoned in basements. She's the one that went under fire and rescued these children and brought them out. She tried to get them to Ukraine, but the Ukrainians wouldn't take them. She tried to get them to Europe, but they labeled her a terrorist for what she was doing. So off to Russia they go, where they were well cared for, fully accounted, protected. If a Ukrainian family, and the Russians list their names, they're not hiding it from anybody. If a Ukrainian family says, "That's our child," Russia returns them to the family. That's what the whole purpose is. It was so they don't die in a basement. And this is the girl that did it. So that's the first interview that we published just today, and we'll be publishing interviews, at least one a day, maybe up to two a day going forward. We got, like I said, 30 interviews, so we got 2 weeks of material out there. But this will just blow your mind, because every interview just exposes the lies of the West, the absolute lies of the West. And it also introduces people to just how decent the Russian people are. I mean, these are decent human beings. They're not perfect, not at all. They make mistakes. They have some ideas that I don't agree with. That's okay. I have ideas they probably don't agree with. But at the end of the day, what we do agree upon is that we have to learn to get along. We have to live in peace with one another. And these interviews expose the reality of Russia unlike anything that anybody has ever done. I can honestly say that what happened last week is unique in the annals of U.S.-Russian relations. And I just feel like, if I drop dead of a heart attack today, I accomplished something really great. But there's more to be done. I plan on going back in November and continuing this, because until we have peace, you can't rest on your laurels. This was a good start, but there's so much more work that needs to be done. But this last week was, it was memorable in every way, shape, and form. I'm very glad I did it. I'm glad to be home, because it was man, I felt like I felt like a boxer after 15 rounds, just totally drained and pummeled and all that. And this is after each day, and then getting up the next morning and have to start all over again. But it was such a worthwhile project. And everybody I interviewed, without exception, everybody interviewed was a wonderful interview that provided unique insight to this. So, it's pretty cool.
Great. Thank you so much, Scott. Great pleasure as always. See you soon.